The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the Honourable Member for Wentworth.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Australia is a wonderful, extraordinary country in so many respects, but the prevalence of family and domestic violence is not one. It is true that this violence is more common on average in other countries, particularly in comparable places like Britain or the US, but we lag behind countries like Austria, Ireland and Spain, where women are almost half as likely to suffer intimate partner violence as in Australia. We're closer to the middle of the OECD distribution than the bottom, and that's where we ought to be. According to the Institute of Health and Welfare, around 2.2 million Australian adults have been the victim of physical violence from a partner. A woman is killed every single week in Australia from a current or former partner. That is a statistic. It is the lives of people we should never forget. Domestic violence is typically associated with a current partner, but is most often perpetrated by a previous partner. The chance that you know someone, a friend or family member, who's been the victim of violence is very high, though you may not know it. So many people who experience this violence don't want to be known. I remember in my own working life a teammate coming into the office with her clothes in a bag, leaving her home that morning to escape family violence and with no plan of where she was going to be sleeping that evening. Around 3/4 of the victims of violence were women and about 500,000 of the victims were men. It occurs across every age and demographic group. The victims and the impact of this violence can be costly and long-lived. Firstly, simply the economic cost to the state. My local police commander told me that up to 50% of time in police was used with domestic violence incidents. But the bigger cost is on people. Many victims later experience anxiety, depression and disability. Domestic and family violence is a leading cause of homelessness. And I want to, as I speak of this, draw attention to the wonderful grassroots organisations that do so much work to support victims of domestic violence. It was only the other day that I visited the Bondi Cottage, an organisation in my local electorate in Wentworth, which provides counselling for women suffering domestic violence, as well as occasional emergency childcare, so those women can actually access that counselling. It is absolutely vital that we continue to support organisations like that and that we continue to focus on the grassroots organisations that have been shown time and time again to be most effective in supporting victims of domestic violence. And I take my hat off and pay homage to all those people who work in this space, as well as those people who have supported other family members, friends and colleagues through what is one of the most difficult times in people's lives. Let us come now to the legislation. It is absolutely true that when people experience domestic violence, many of them need to take time off work to restart their lives or to get the counselling or support they need to even leave. Around 20% of women and 17% of men who've experienced violence from a de facto partner have had to take leave. And under the National Employment Standards as they currently stand, Australian employees have the right of 5 days unpaid domestic violence leave each year. This leave is available to someone who is experiencing violent, threatening or abusive behaviour by a current or former partner or family member or someone related by kinship. Let's be honest, employers can and often do provide more than this, but this is currently the minimum standard by law. Employers can also ask for evidence such as police or court documents, support service documents or statutory declaration. They have the right, but they're not obliged to do so. And my understanding is that most employers would not normally insist on employing an employee providing such documentation. Under the new standard proposed in this bill, employees would have the right of 10 days of paid leave rather than 5 unpaid leave each year. This would be available to full-time, part-time and casual employees at the full rate of pay that they would normally receive. This principle of 10 days paid leave at full pay is one that I wholeheartedly support. And I suspect many other employers would feel the same way. But we should be aware of the danger of implying a sensible principle to all workplaces without first thinking through of the details of how this is going to operate in practice. And in this, I am thinking most particularly of small businesses, where I've spent so much of my career. I'm not implying that small businesses would impose this entitlement or, they're too hard-hearted to support their staff. Frankly, it's quite the opposite. Most businesses are small, and most small businesses are small, and they have close relationships with their people, and they want to really support that their people feel valued and obviously safe, and do enormous work to with their people so that they feel that. They want to do the best by their people. But this change will impose some potentially difficult obligations on them, which is the basis for the concerns that I and others have with this change. One obligation is financial. Larger, even medium-sized businesses will no doubt be able to cope with these changes. But for small businesses, there are times when money is very tight. This bill is applying new financial obligations on those businesses without any support, without offering any relief from other financial obligations, or not even obligations on the sort of bureaucracy that government imposes on small business. I understand that a number of business groups have raised their concerns with the government and through the Senate inquiry process, but without resolution. Another obligation will be figuring out how to provide casual employees on leave at their full rate of pay. For some casuals, their working hours are consistent and predictable, and I'm sure in those cases there won't be much trouble. But for other casuals, their hours are inconsistent and unpredictable. And therefore, I think that we run the risk of having quite difficult conversations about what is the full rate of pay for someone who works different hours every week. What if sometimes their hours are taken in ordinary time and sometimes with loading? It's not difficult to imagine a scenario where fair-minded people come to different views in terms of what their full rate of pay should be, potentially creating a dispute and another source of stress when an individual is already experiencing a hard time. A third concern is that this might require quite personal conversations between employers and employees, conversations that some small business people may not be equipped to handle. But I'm not aware currently of any support the government is providing into ensuring that business people are able to be as delicate, as sensitive as their employees deserve. I know that the Fair Work has published a fact sheet for managers. It includes tips such as stay calm and respond appropriately, or take the matter very seriously. I think the Commonwealth of Australia can do better than that and must do better before this affects small businesses. If we want to do the right by people in desperately difficult situations, we need to provide support that is actually useful to employers, ideally supported in conjunction with those who are expected to use it, also reflecting the multicultural Australia that we have and the number of different languages spoken in the workplace. These concerns will not stop me supporting the bill because I support the principle behind it, and I believe in providing real and valued support to Australians in these situations. But I hope that the government rethinks its stance on how the bill will apply to small businesses and whether we can secure the outcome of paid leave without imposing additional obligations on those businesses, or with at least providing the best practice advice to those businesses and reducing administrative burdens on small businesses in other ways. In fact, I hope it rethinks its stance on small businesses more generally. It is terrifying how easy it is for Parliament to solve a problem by passing a law and leaving it to businesses to figure out how to implement the change, and businesses facing huge penalties if they fail to properly implement ill-designed policies. And when businesses raise concerns, they are often brushed aside, as small businesses were in the case of this bill. Well, let me tell you, a cost that seems small when you're sitting in the House of Parliament can be the difference between, viability and non-viability when you're a small business out in the community. This government, and indeed this Parliament, is filled with many smart, well-intentioned people. But it doesn't have as many people as it should who have run small businesses and understand how they work. And when a government lacks expertise in something, it's sensible and appropriate for it to engage with that community. The government needs to engage appropriately and with an open mind at an early stage so that policy can be designed around the legitimate concerns of businesses and ensure that it works as much for them as for workers and for larger businesses. On this issue and on others, they haven't done this. Let me offer a channel for that engagement. I've spent most of my life from an early age in and around small business. Talk to me and I'm very happy to help you understand their concerns. or come along to an event organised by the Parliamentary Friends of Small and Medium Businesses and Entrepreneurs and meet some of those people who these sorts of bills affect. Talk to your businesses, share your policy goals and listen to their thoughts on how it will work in practice. I promise you they'll be constructive. Their goals are not political. They are retailers, they are cafe owners, they are small fashion companies, they're small technology companies. These are people trying to create jobs and prosperity in the Australian community, and they deserve our wholehearted support. They just want to do what the government asks them to do, and then they want to get back to running their businesses and focusing on what they do best, which is supporting their customers, working with their suppliers, and supporting their employees. So I support the principle of this bill, and I look forward to it passing into law and providing relief to so many people facing domestic violence. But I do hope the government reconsiders how businesses can be supported in its implementation and how they can engage with small business community in the future. Thank you.
The question is that this bill